Berurah class. Today's class is brought to you by, no, I'm just kidding. Today's class is going to introduce you to Siman Kuf Yud Ches 118. And the basic format is the same. The only thing is that I am trying out a couple of new pieces of technology to help me out today. So bear with me as I am potentially a bit slow on the uptake as I try out a couple of new things. But I'm trying to make the text a little larger for me. So that's one thing that's important. Another thing that's important is trying to make sure that everyone has access to the material. So I always recommend that if you're not sure where to follow along, you can always follow along in Safaria or Torah app. Let's begin with today's class, continuing in understanding the different blessings of the Shemona Esrei. So here we are in 118. In 118, we are going to discuss how to complete the blessing of Hashiva Shofatenu. Okay, so returning our judges. And so first of all, it's always important to make sure, as we have previously learned in numerous occasions, that the blessings have to have both the beginning and the end to be consistent with the liturgical text. The content must reflect the beginning and the end. And so that's what we're going to discuss here now. So the blessing that starts with the words Hashiva Shofatenu Kiva Rishona. Okay, so the restoring our judges. It is completed with the words Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat. So the proper text of that is to complete it with the king who loves righteousness and judgment, okay, or justice. Now, this changes a little bit for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. The Shulchan Aruch continues in saying that from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur, you say Hamelech Hamishpat. So the Ramah then adds, if you by accident still said Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat, you don't need to repeat the blessing or the Shemona Esrei. We only say that you have to repeat the blessing during the rest of the year if you were to say the word Hakel Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat. Okay, so that's if you had that blessing. And this is discussed below in Siman Tuf Kuf Pei Beis 582. The Mishnah explains, if you say HaMelech HaMishpat or HaKel HaMishpat, those are sufficient. However, we have the custom to say HaMelech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. Rosh Hashanah say HaMelech HaMishpat. And we have two hays because those who say you not fulfill the obligation unless you say Melech and Mishpat. But once you say those words Melech and Mishpat, we say that therefore it's okay. And in establishing the statement of the Ramah that we don't have to repeat the blessing again, look at those poskim who came after him, that if you went ahead and said Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat or then HaMelech HaMishpat, that would be fine. However, you definitely don't repeat the blessing again for this one. Okay, now we're going to take a look at Siman 119, Kuf Yud Tes. That's the next one over here. This one's a little bit longer. Okay. Personal prayers. Oh, did we do this last time? Oh, my note must have been incomplete then. Okay. So we should be... Okay. I think we did this last time. Oh, I'm so sorry. My note said that we started at 117. And then... Okay. So... Because I remember adding personal prayers in... I think we did this last time. I'm so sorry. Okay. Oh. All right. My bad. All right, so really we should be starting with Siman 120. Well, yeah, I apologize. So we reviewed Siman 118 again. Let's go. We did 119, adding personal prayers. Review is always good, right? Thank you. All right, let's see. So this next one is the Tefillah of Ritzei. Okay, so as we get to the end of Shemona Esrei, one of the last prayers is Ritzei. Okay, so we're meaning the prayer of Ritzei is the introduction to the end of the last three blessings of Shemona Esrei, whereby we talk about the temple service itself. Okay, and we request that it be returned. So look, there is a dispute about whether or not this should be included in every single Shemona Esrei. So the Shulchan Aruch explains that the blessing of Ritzei is recited in every single prayer service, and not like those who have the custom to not say it at Mincha. So what does that mean? Okay, so it says, the custom was, how do we start the prayer of Ritzei? So at Mincha time, they used to say the following. They used to start with the words Yishei Yisrael Usil Sam B'Avas Gabal Ratzon. Okay, instead of starting Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu B'Amcha Yisrael V'Yisrael Sam V'Hasheves Havodad V'Beisecha V'Yishei, and then we started V'Yishei Yisrael, and that actually not everybody even said the vav in V'Yishei. That's me going outside the Mishnah Berurah. Let's go back. The Mishnah Berurah says you start from Yishei Yisrael. So the Pri Megadim writes the following: now that our custom is to say Ritzei, someone who skips those words is changing from the liturgy established by the rabbis of the Talmud. And we said in Kuf Yud Tes, in the previous halacha, that if you make a mistake in that and you change the actual nusach of it, you have to go back and say it again. You're not allowed to go ahead and change that. However, the Pri Megadim writes, the Mishnah Berurah writes, that he's not sure if this is the same thing. Okay, if you've made a mistake in the actual nusach, the actual liturgy of the prayer, and he says that if you look, for example, in we say about the Shachar service, which we said in Siman Samach Daled 64, okay, and a few other places, that if you make a mistake, you can, it's not considered having to go ahead and redo the whole thing. And here's a number of other sources over there. He points out 1059 and 114 and 187. Okay, so he now quotes the Torah. Okay, so we've established that the statements of the Mishnah Berurah is to say that we're not sure if this really means, you have to go ahead and restart the whole thing. The Torah explains the following: why do we add the words V'Yishei Yisrael Usfil Asam? Okay, so 3/4 of the way into the blessing, we say to bring those things back. So even though now the service that we engage in is to say prayers, and those prayers come in the stead of an actual sacrifice. So we ask that you receive these prayers, address them to God in their stead. And then he quotes the Midrash. He says the following, that there is an angel whose name is Michael. So he's one of the archangels. In English, I use that term. There's higher angels and there's lower angels. But he's a somewhat sentient angel. Okay, and he basically is one of those angels that brings forward the souls of the righteous, and he brings them close to what's known as the heavenly altar. Okay, and what does that mean? It means that there's a heavenly altar where the souls of the righteous are brought close in order for them to be appreciated and beloved by Hashem. And so therefore we say Yishei Yisrael, meaning it's not actually fire burnt offerings, but rather the Jewish people themselves who were truly righteous. The Mishnah Berurah continues with another explanation, and he says that there is another way to understand that asking for the return of the service and for the acceptance of the Yishei Yisrael and then to receive the prayers, okay, is to say that we want you to actually bring back the service, which includes the burnt offerings of the Jewish people, and also to receive their prayers. So that one does not depend on the other. Okay, and so there's different explanations to this, and there's a dispute between the Taz and the Gra as to which one is preferable. Okay, now on to 121. Okay, so 120 was also short. We'll get through 121 today as well. So I need to adjust the timestamp on this thing. So 121. Here's what we learned. Okay, so the first halacha. So when do we bow during Modim? So the first halacha says that we bow at the beginning of Modim. Okay, so that's the first thing that we do. So what does that mean? We bow at the beginning, we bow at the end. So the Mishnah explains, what does it mean to bow? So the first thing that the Mishnah says is that, well, if you have to spit, don't lean over, don't bend over until the phlegm goes back down your throat. And he says, look also what we said about this in Siman Sadi Zion 2. So in Siman 97 2, we talked about where were proper places to expectorate. What's righteous? Righteous means that they're people who have gone ahead and committed themselves to performing the mitzvos correctly, and they've dedicated themselves to this for a long period of time. So that's what we refer to, generally speaking, as the righteous. We bow at the blessing of Modim. Okay, so the Gemara says, if you don't bow at Modim, then one finds that they are unable to bend their spine, much like the serpent's unable to. You're welcome. Let's see. So at the beginning of Modim, so at the word Modim itself, you start to bow, and then at Modim Anachnu Lach She'atahu, that's where the bowing occurs, and then when you get to the name of God, you stand up. You also say it at the end. At the end is the blessing of Hatov Shimcha, right? That your name is great, and so when you say Baruch Atah, that's when you do the normal bowing. Okay. Now, the rules of bowing we explained earlier in video one that explains Siman 113.7. We talked about that there. So just a quick review of that. It means that you bend at the knees, you fold at the waist, and you kind of dip your head down so that you kind of lean into it. And then when you come up, you lift up. Okay, you lift the head and the eyes first. Okay, so that's what that refers to. But if you'd like more detail about that, you can refer to that class that we go into that in greater detail. Okay, the second halacha here: one who says modim modim shall be silenced. Okay, why? Now, Mishnah Berurah explains. So first of all, this is a quote from the Gemara. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, we silence them. So even though they didn't bow twice, but doubling the words is inappropriate, because it looks like you're asking two different powers or forces to intercede on your behalf. For that, we have interacted with two of them. Okay, and this is a quote directly from the Talmud itself. Okay, the end over here, the third halacha, it says a single person should not recite the priestly blessing. Okay, Birchas Kohanim comes after this. It's right before the last blessing. Okay, and the Ramah says, and that is the important thing. And it appears to me that this is the proper custom. But there are a number of places where that's not the case. A singular person may say it, as long as he's able to go ahead and he's acceptable to do the Nesias Kapayim for raising his hands, but I don't think that that's correct. Okay, so he's saying that there were people out there who used to kind of do Berurah by himself. So funny story, I'll tell you in a second. Let's do the Mishnah Berurah over here. So what this means is that if a person is reciting their own Berachas Kohanim, they shouldn't do it. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, nonetheless, if a person went ahead and said it, we don't make him do the Shemona Esrei over again, and we shouldn't stop people from doing it. But a person shouldn't recite the first paragraph in the house of a mourner in an Avel's house. Okay. And so therefore, but there are some people who disagree. Nonetheless, we should try to avoid it. So even though it's not necessarily clear what that is. So just interesting, I guess it's an interesting little aside. There are people who went ahead and recited the priestly blessing on their own. So that's kind of a crazy little thing to think about. Just kind of point this out over here. So let's see here. Let's see. Oh, I had made a note for myself to look at the tour, but it's not. Unfortunately, it's not working. Okay. Well, the little note I made over here to connect to that is not working for that. Okay, well, I apologize. So I made a note to do that, and that note is not working. Anyway, so I will take a look into that and find out why that's not working correctly. Anyway, so it's an interesting little discussion over here as to why there was why singular people would go ahead and recite the priestly blessing. The Mishnah Berurah is not, the tour is not on the shelf behind me. The Shulchan Aruch is. I made a note on an app over here to bring up the tour. Unfortunately, where I'm sitting here, the tour is out here. I had to get up and go wander around, would not be there. So the tour says the following. Fortunately, I doubled up on this to make sure that I had the ability to do that. So the idea of saying Shemona Esrei, the idea of reciting the priestly blessing for oneself is an interesting one, because it's not 100% common custom to do such a thing. Okay, so that's one thing that's interesting about it. So it's not brought down in the Torah specifically to go ahead and do and add the priestly blessing yourself, but it is something that does happen to be something that did occur. So now the thing is that when you finish the Shemona Esrei, you should be doing the priestly blessing first. So the Beis Yosef says that this custom of adding the Shemona Esrei was uncommon. Okay, so it was not something that was done in a number of communities. So he says that you should not. He says the reason why people were doing it was because they believed that they were able to say it on their own in their own private prayer service. So it's interesting. It's an interesting development to say that, nonetheless, to say that. So, alrighty, I think we will hold it here, and we will pick up next time with our laws. I will adjust the title over here so that we know which chapters we've covered, and we will return to our study of the Mishnah Berurah for next time. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we will see you next week.